Let's go back to our Washington, D.C. White House correspondent, Kimberly Halkett. You've been listening in to certainly what James Bays had to say, what Adrian Brown had to say from Beijing, and, of course, Tyler White there from Nebraska. And varying views, they all seem to converge on the same conclusion at the moment that both Washington and Pyongyang need to talk to each other. It's really what the next move will be. What are you hearing so far?
Well, I just was having this opportunity to kind of look at some of the past statements that were made in the last 48 hours coming out of Washington, coming out of the Trump administration. I think it's important to think about what has been set up to this point with regard to what will happen moving forward if this summit doesn't occur. What we've consistently heard from the Trump administration is they said if talks fail, if this summit is in some way postponed or canceled, then the maximum pressure campaign continues. This is something that the U.S. president said when the German Chancellor Angela Merkel was here many weeks ago. And certainly this is something that he said would be in coordination with U.S. allies. So that's the first thing that we have to kind of examine is now what? The maximum pressure campaign in terms of tough financial sanctions, isolating North Korea, according to the Trump administration and apparently also U.S. allies, that this will continue. The other thing that we need to consider in all of this, because certainly we've been talking about the National Security Advisor, John Bolton, also Mike Pence, the U.S. Vice President, their comments about the Libya model seeming to really be the point that was most concerning for North Korea, and that's why they sent this very strong statement, which ultimately the U.S. president says was the reason he decided to cancel this summit. But we also have to look at who else might be to blame for all of this. And certainly we saw just 2 days ago, as the South Korean president, Moon Jae-in, was here at the White House, we started to see the U.S. president laying some blame against China for potentially changing the dynamic in terms of that relationship between the North Korean leader and the United States. I was looking at what the president had to say, and he said President Xi, the Chinese president, is a friend. That's what the U.S. president called him. But he also called him a world-class poker player. In other words, suggesting that there was some trickery going on, and even saying that something happened after that second meeting where Kim Jong-un was in China, suggesting that there was some sort of, as your guest pointed out, perhaps assurance that had been provided. If you do not like what you're hearing from the United States, Chairman, we will have your back. So perhaps this has emboldened. Perhaps now the U.S. president will lay some blame with China instead of with his own administration that clearly has been very toxic in terms of rhetoric towards North Korea. You have to remember, very recently, in the last year or so, John Bolton penned an editorial in the Wall Street Journal where he made out the legal case for a preemptive strike on North Korea. This man has been toxic with regard to his rhetoric towards North Korea for years, more than a decade. And this is someone that North Korea has long not liked. Donald Trump specifically just pulled him in to be his new national security advisor, knowing that this summit was on the horizon. So there may be a little bit of sort of Washington massaging of the story, spinning, as they like to call it here, in terms of the facts, trying to lay the blame. There's no question that already we saw, even before the cancellation of the summit, the U.S. president pointing a finger at China, at President Xi, as perhaps the reason that things were not moving forward as he had hoped in terms of the talks for June 12th that now have, of course, been canceled.